The Goat House is back with the absolute best fits of free agency. Fits that make me feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Hopefully they have the same effect on you. Let's take a look. So what we're doing here is taking free agents in teams that are absolute perfect fits. We won't talk about every free agent or every team. We don't want to force things. There's only so many perfect fits. These also aren't necessarily predictions. They're best fits, but a lot of time fits become reality. At least those teams make a push for that free agent. Starting with Trey Smith, a top tier free agent. Currently does not have the tag. The Chiefs don't really plan on doing so. I think they should, just because they can trade him, but that's off topic. There's several fits, but there's an obvious perfect fit here. That's the Tennessee Titans. Check off a lot of boxes. There's a connection there. There's a need there. And there's a scheme fit. Starting with the scheme fit, with the Chiefs, Trey Smith was best in a lot of gap blocking and man blocking, obviously, inside zone. He can block an outside zone, but he's not a guy that's going to get out in space and dominate out there a ton. And that's Tennessee Titans under Brian Callahan. They want to mix their blocking schemes up a bit. You know, when he was with the Bengals, a lot of inside zone, a lot of gaps. So it makes sense as a fit. They have a need, and the connection is Mike Borgonzi, their new GM, was the assistant GM for the Kansas City Chiefs. But another team to watch for, a team that could be the leading team to get Trey Smith, is the Chicago Bears. We've talked about that a bit. He could definitely fit the Chicago Bears. They're badly looking, needing and looking for offensive linemen, and there's a Ryan Poles connection there as well. And the obvious best fit is the Tennessee Titans, who will be in on Trey Smith and could land him, but Chicago Bears are a team to watch when it comes to free agency and Trey Smith. Speaking of the Chicago Bears, there's a couple fits for the Bears, this one and another one, but Drew Dalman of the Falcons, a big-time center and a big-time free agent. Very well could go back to the Falcons, could go to a different team. We'll talk about that in a second. But the league is pretty split. Some teams just do not value centers that much. They look for a guy that can snap the ball and stay in front of someone. They find that guy in the third, fourth, fifth round of the NFL draft, a cheap guy that sits around in free agency. And some of the league really values the position. Ben Johnson coming to town to Chicago Bears. Who did he have with Detroit? Frank Ragnow, one of the best. I think when he's healthy, to me, what I watch, I think he's the most talented center in football. And there's, with the stars on that offensive line, there's times where I'm going, in the run game, that guy is the most important. What Ragnow does in the run game, right down the middle, obviously the center position. So we know Ben Johnson's going to value it. We know the Bears, who have had struggles in the offense line, specifically center, will value it. They have a lot of cap space. It is a really good fit. I'll also watch for his current team. The Atlanta Falcons are going to clear some space, and they're going to want Drew Dalman back. That's kind of been my prediction, but I know the Bears are going to be all in. There's some other teams that haven't valued centers super, super highly, but definitely could use Dalman. Chargers, Niners, or just some teams, so we will see. But I do love the fit. It makes me feel, really good about, if the Bears could add a guy like this. And the Bears actually have another just obvious perfect fit, not as big as if they were to land Dalman, and I hope teams are careful when paying Chase Young. But Chase Young for the Chicago Bears, the Bears could use another defensive end. Maybe they don't want to spend a ton because they already spent a ton on the other side with Montez Sweat. Guess who Montez Sweat played with? Who was his duo in Washington? It was Chase Young. Again, the Bears need another DN. Guess who signed Chase Young with the Saints last year? Their head coach and their defensive coach, Dennis Allen, who is now the Bears defensive coordinator. It makes a lot of sense, scheme fit, and every reason I just explained. So I'd watch, for the fit and for the landing spot of the Chicago Bears. I'm actually leaning towards, and we'll have our predictions come out a little closer free agency, but I'm leaning towards that prediction. And I do like the Raiders as well. They could lose Kuntz. They could use someone next to, or opposite, I should say, of Chase Young, Max Crosby, a little bit different of a player there. And there are some ex-Saints coaching staff guys from just this past year that are now with the Raiders. So that is another team to watch for. Very well could end up back with the Saints, the Lions, Packers, other NFC North teams like the Lions, Packers make some sense as well. But he could hang around a little bit in free agency, and it could be not an instant signing, but we'll see. An obvious one that stands out here with Josh Sweat and the Arizona Cardinals. Josh Sweat, a big-time pass rusher in free agency, went off in the Super Bowl, a key factor of getting pressure on Patrick Mahomes, but he's done that in his career with the Philadelphia Eagles. His best year in terms of sack total, 11 sacks, a few years ago when defensive coordinator Jonathan Gannon was there, and he is now the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals, and the Cardinals have been trying to surge for pass rushers. They've been trying to do it. It's been a struggle, and they can get one with the amount of cap space they have. They have that need, and they have the connection, which with Josh Sweat. So that one's, everyone's got to agree with that one, right? And I would also watch for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This team is a very good roster. They need edge rushers, though. If they can get a big-time one, and there's a good fit here in Josh Sweat, a guy that they kind of like the versatile guys. They're more of a 3-4 base, but they like the physical guys that could put their hand in the dirt, rush from the line as well at times. So that makes sense with Sweat. I'd also watch for the Falcons. The Tennessee Titans have a connection. The former Eagles defensive line coach is now the Titans defensive line coach. So quite a few teams actually stand out, but the Cardinals are currently my prediction, but they happen to be what this video is about, the most perfect fit here for a guy like Josh Sweat, who's a top-tier free agent. Here's an interesting one. Jevon Holland, the Dolphins safety, and it recently came out that the Dolphins probably won't be tagging him, which makes sense. They didn't even tag Christian Wilkins last year. They don't have a lot of spending money, so he's going to hit the open market and be one of the top free agents. Now, also, maybe he doesn't fit the Dolphins anymore. That's kind of been the question recently, but year one, perfect fit, looked like a star in the making, a playmaker in the back end, and can get downhill, could blitz if you need him to. And guess who drafted him? Who was the head coach and the defensive coach of that team? It was Brian Flores, who is now the defensive coordinator of the Minnesota Vikings. And the Vikings have some spending money. They also have Harrison Smith, who's a free agent, could be retiring. Cam Bynum's a free agent. It's just such a perfect fit. And to get the most out of Holland in that deal, it's so perfect, right? But it's a little interesting because the Vikings it sounds like they do want Cam Bynum back. And he's a young player. Remember, he was a corner coming out of college. He turned to safety. He's been a good playmaker for them. And he has upside. They like him, but he brings a lot of energy to the Vikings. So it sounds like they want him back. Could they get Holland and Bynum? I guess I can't rule it out, but I'm not counting on both. So if they do get Bynum back, it kind of even though it's still such a perfect fit, it kind of rules it out. And a team that is heating up when it comes to adding a guy like Jevon Holland, perhaps, is the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I'd keep an eye on them in free agency. There's nothing that says like perfect, yes, absolute fit like the Vikings, but I would watch for the Jags. They're apparently going to be spending on defense, and mainly in that secondary is pretty brutal outside of Tyson Campbell, who was injured at times last year, and they specifically want playmakers, and Jevon Holland is a big-time playmaker, so I would watch them as well. But and obvious, I think you could agree with it as well. The Vikings, Brian Flores, Jevon Holland, that is a fantastic fit for Holland to kind of get things going again and kind of get it back on track of being a potential star safety. Speaking of the Jags, Carlton Davis, the corner from the Lions, ex-Buccaneer, makes a lot of sense for them as they're supposed to spend on specifically the secondary. And last year, the Jags' problem on defense, I thought, was too much man coverage. But why are they running that much man coverage? It felt like they kind of had the players that just weren't the best in zone. They kind of fit that. So they can't completely go away, because they're going to have some of the same players. They can't completely go away from that man coverage, but they want to mix in some zone. So that is where Carlton Davis, that's like the best part about Carlton Davis when it comes to his resume as one of the top free agent corners, is when he was with the Bucs, it was like all zone coverage. That's what Todd Bowles and the Buccaneers are known for, is their zone coverage. Then he goes to Detroit. And Detroit's known for the most man coverage in football last year. And he looked outstanding early in the year in that man coverage defense. Then he was injured, and that was tough. The Lions missed him. So that makes a lot of sense for the Jags. Again, they're looking for a corner. They don't want to spend like top dollar DJ Reed money, I don't think, because they just paid Tyson Campbell. That next tier, which is not too far off, that's Carlton Davis. Mix a man, mix a zone, makes some sense for Jacksonville Jaguars as a fit, and they possibly could actually go after him as well. And I'd watch for the Lions bringing him back. They want to see more with them having Carlton Davis in there. They were much better with them. They know that he can run man, run zone. They like running man, but they're switching. Obviously, they lost some staff members there. So could that be a blessing on defense? Because they do need to mix in more zones. So I'd watch for them. The Raiders make some sense as well. Perhaps new GM as Tampa Bay Buccaneers background, but they could use a corner. But these are the teams really to keep an eye on, and there's an obvious fit there with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Another one that I talked about a bit a few weeks ago, maybe more than that, was Justin Reid with the Jets. And the Jets have brought in Aaron Glenn. They brought in Steve Wilks. These guys like to run a lot of man coverage. The Jets were running zone a lot before they were mixing it up, but they're going to need some guys that are capable of man coverage. The Jets also didn't value the safety position with their last staff. Aaron Glenn will. You see what Kirby Joseph did as a playmaker. Brian Branch is more of a nickel, but we see what he could do manning up different guys, and being a key factor. Justin Reed is a big-time man coverage safety. Recently, it almost feels like he's getting better in his career. I know he's been around for, feels like a bit, but he's still, under 30. So Aaron Glenn's going to value safety more, so they're going to need safeties. He runs a lot of man, so does Steve Wilks, who the defense coordinator is. It just makes sense as a fit there. This is kind of that man coverage safety of free agency. So I love the fit with the Jets. It is hard to see him away from the Chiefs with the way he's been playing, and he obviously fits their scheme very well. They're going to want him back. I think he feels like he probably would want to be back there. So I'd still watch out for the Chiefs. I'd look for these two teams to be battling for Justin Reed. And the Jets have another one, Charvarius Ward, who's my number 2 corner in free agency. We'll have rankings and predictions in very near future videos. But Charvarius Ward, 2 years ago, so not this past year, the year before, he was outstanding. He was one of the very best corners in that season. He's not an elite corner by any means, but that season, you could say he was elite that season. And that year, the Niners ran a lot more man than they're usually typically all zone. They mixed it up, but they ran a lot more man that year, and it felt like Ward really thrived. And he's a Chiefs background guy. Before that, they run a lot of man. So he's a guy that's going to thrive more in man coverage, but you can also sprinkle in some zone. Obviously, he's that veteran guy. He's been around a little bit, so that's good. He's a very solid corner. It already sounds like he's not coming back to the Niners. He doesn't want to stay in that area. I love the fit with the Jets, and circle back. That year he was outstanding. Who was the defensive coordinator for the Jets? For the Niners. It was Steve Wilks. He was hired as the Jets defensive coordinator. So that it's a beautiful fit. They're probably going to lose DJ Reed. We'll see. They need someone else opposite of Sauce Gardner, I should say. Boom. Makes some sense there. But will they value it? They got to save money for Sauce Gardner extension in the near future. If they let DJ Reed walk, do they turn around and pay Ward the money? Maybe not. Other teams I like the Steelers as well. They're a team that mixes in man and zone. They need more of a veteran corner in there. Kind of mess around with some young guys right now. They have some spending money. Could see that. Could see the Packers, but I would like for the Packers to actually run more man for me to say, yeah, yes, that's a fit. But we will see. But there's an obvious fit there, as you could tell, with the New York Jets. Speaking of the Jets, here is a free agent of theirs, Jamion Sherwood, who had a very, very productive year last year. In terms of perfect fit, it's like 50-50 who I could have put there, the Niners or the Falcons. I decided to go with the Niners here, and I've been kind of hinting at these are probably going to go to one of these teams, and I've been leaning with the Falcons, and I currently am as my prediction. But both these teams could use a linebacker, but they have Sherwood. Played for the Jets last year, was super productive. Jeff Ulbrich was his defensive coordinator, eventually turned into the interim head coach, but Robert Saleh was there as well. Saleh's back with the Niners. Jeff Ulbrich is with the Falcons. They're both defensive coordinators, so there's an obvious chemistry or connection fit there. He can play in their defenses, so I'd watch out for these teams. We know it's a scheme fit. We know it's a coach fit, which is the same thing basically. The reason I said perfect fit, Niners over Falcons, man, I can just see him playing so well next to Fred Warner in that defense under Robert Saleh. You just get the most out of him. With the Falcons, it's an obvious fit. I'm leaning toward that being my actual prediction. But I think you get a little bit more out of him next to Fred Warner in that Niners defense. Do the Niners bring Dre Greenlaw back? To me, I would rather go this route. Younger, more athletic, healthier, more upside. Greenlaw did not look right when he came back, but of course, more time off. Maybe he could be right. We'll see what they decide there with Greenlaw. DJ Reed, my top corner of free agency, going to get paid a lot. He's a big-time corner. He's only getting better. His best years of his career was recently with the Jets under defensive coordinator Jeff Ulbrich, who is now the defensive coordinator for the Atlanta Falcons. They definitely could use another corner. Now, does he actually land there? I guess the debate against that, the argument against that, is they're already paying A.J. Terrell a ton of money. They're paying Jesse Bates, a free safety, a ton of money, but they do badly need more defensive backs. But do they spend, once again, big money on corner? It's possible. We'll see. They have ways to clear a lot of space, but there is an obvious fit. He's played his best football very, very recently. I'd say last year. He was better than Sauce Gardner last year. Jeff Ulbrich was not only the defensive coach, but he took over as the interim head coach. It makes a lot of sense there. But watch for the Raiders. There is a connection with Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll was coaching the Seahawks where Reed was kind of just getting going in his career, and they badly need a corner. They have a lot of space, so I'd watch out for that. It maybe financially makes more sense than the Falcons, but in terms of actual perfect fit, the Falcons do stand out. But a lot of teams could be after Reed, top corner in free agency, but you're going to have the money to do it. Paulson Adebo, actually one of the top 5 corners, a little underrated, very young, upside, big-time playmaker experience, and man, maybe has some upside in zone. Raiders make a lot of sense as a fit. They want to stay young. Adebo's young. They don't want maybe to get one of the older guys. I mean, none of the other guys, they could still get DJ Reed, not super old, but because they're still kind of retooling. So Adebo kind of falls in line with that. They need a corner. They have ex-Saints guys on in terms of staff on the defensive staff. So there's a connection there. They have some spending money, and they end up with either DJ Reed or Paulson Adebo. This one makes a lot of sense as a fit. Patrick Graham, defensive coach, runs a lot of a bit of man, but he'll mix it up, so it makes sense. I'd watch for the Jags as well. I like the Broncos. I've mentioned them in the past. To the Broncos, Sean Payton was there the year they drafted Paulson Adebo, so he's got to be a fan. I personally think they could use another corner opposite of Patrick Surtain, but the Broncos could disagree with that. We'll see. And the defense was starting to go downhill at the end of the year because the corner spot opposite of Surtain. But the Jags, I just keep hearing they're going to spend on defense, and they want specifically playmakers, guys that get their hands on the ball. Paulson Adebo makes some sense there. So I'd watch out for the Jags for types of players like this as well. But the Raiders do make a lot of sense. Could go back to the Saints. I mentioned the Broncos as well. Osa Odighizuwa, the defensive tackle of the Cowboys, had a career year last year getting after the quarterback, racking up the sacks. He could improve a little bit in terms of stopping the run, but man, he's a guy that's going to get interior pressure. He's going to get after the quarterback. That's what everyone's looking for. Look what the Eagles did in the Super Bowl, did all year, I should say. It is a game changer, so he's going to get paid a lot more than people think. Obvious fit here with the Commanders. Dan Quinn coached them before this year with the Dallas Cowboys. He knows what he's capable of. The interior, if you look at the Commanders on paper, the interior looks like it's a star-studded interior. It didn't really play to that this year. Maybe because of fit. Do they move on from Jonathan Allen? Does he fit Dan Quinn's defense? And then do they have a lot of spending money? And then do they add a guy like Odighizuwa? Johnny Newton could be that high-end rotation guy still, while Deron Payne, the obvious best guy in the interior and a starter for them as long as he's healthy. So it makes sense as a fit. Could be a need. They could financially afford him. The coaching connection there. I'd also watch for the Chargers. They're looking for interior help. They weren't able to spend a lot of money last year. They have a lot of spending money this year. They can make it happen. Harbaugh really values the trenches, so it would make sense to go get a pass rusher from the interior and a guy like Osa Odighizuwa. But I could see a lot of teams. The Panthers, Steelers, Niners, back to the Cowboys. Several teams here. The Bengals, I had the Bengals high up for a lot of the interior guys or the high-end corners. But man, it sounds like they're gonna tag Higgins. They're gonna give him a lot of money. They got to pay Chase in the future, which is future money. They got to give Trey Hendrickson a new deal. So how much are they going to – they're going to probably get – they won't be able to get like the top of the top tier guys, I would think, but we will see. Cam Robinson, former Jags offense tackle, obviously got traded to the Vikings at the trade deadline and played pretty well for them. A little bit better right when he came in compared to the very end, but he played very well, I thought, for Minnesota at left tackle. The Chiefs desperately need left tackle help. They've been struggling to try to find it. Unless Tooney's going to stay at tackle, he played all right out there. And they find a guard, but I think the other way around. They put Tooney back at left guard. They find a left tackle. Cam Robinson makes a lot of sense as a fit. They grabbed Jawan Taylor a few years ago from the Jags. Cam Robinson played alongside with them. He is that same, coming from that same scheme. So the Chiefs would obviously find him as a fit and a guy they could afford, a guy they most definitely could bring in. And the Rams as well, I think he'd fit well at left tackle there for them. Depending on what they do with Alaric Jackson, do they want to get more of a veteran guy, or do they just lose Jackson when they wanted him? I think if they want him, they probably can keep him. But Robinson, definitely a big-time fit here for the Kansas City Chiefs. And speaking of Alaric Jackson, we talked about this a few weeks ago in a video that I really loved, the Patriots fit. We brought that up, and he's a sneaky good free agent, young with experience, still has upside, a very solid left tackle. Just makes a lot of sense for the Patriots, scheme fit-wise, but mainly they need a left tackle. They have spending money, and they are a very young team led by Drake May. They don't want like these. Look at the other tackles in the draft class. I mean, some of them include long-time veterans that have durability concerns. I'm not really saying Cam Robinson necessarily, but this guy is a young guy. That's what the Patriots are looking for. Young to be part of they're not in stage one of the rebuild, but they're still kind of in there. Young to be part of the rebuild, but also could actually help us and actually play well. And then Jackson checks off those boxes there. And I very well could see the Rams wanting him back, so I would watch for the Rams to try to get him back. But a beautiful fit there with the New England Patriots, a young, up-and-coming team for Alaric Jackson. Darius Slayton, the Giants receiver, might be making some more money as long as T. Higgins gets tagged like expected, because that kind of bumps him up the receiver rankings list of free agency, so he can make a lot more. And I've talked about Slayton a few weeks ago in a video, and I've talked about the Panthers quite a bit. I love that fit, and it just makes a lot of sense because the Panthers definitely could use a receiver, for that offense for Bryce Young, but their best receiver right now is Adam Thielen. He is a slot receiver, a technician type of receiver, really good route runner, incredible hands. Man, he's still got it, still making plays with Bryce Young. Slot receiver, again, like I said. So they could use a starting outside receiver, and Slayton brings to the table is speed. And look what Bryce Young had at Alabama. I mean, there was a lot of traits with those receivers, but there was a lot of just getting open fast downfield and just airing it downfield. Bryce Young on the run, making a big-time play. I see Darius Slayton as a fit. So a lot different than Adam Thielen. Technician, route runner, hands from the slot. Slayton, outside, speed, big play, home run ability. And obviously they have Jalen Coker, who's a little, up-and-comer, a little bit of a mix of everything. Really good hands on him. And then Liggett, who is, at this point, it has to be kind of a gadget guy until he kind of figures it out. So then you kind of have everything. You have a bit of everything for Carolina. And they should be in the market for an outside receiver like Slayton. I also like the Titans. Man, it was tough to pick. There's a lot of teams. Before, when I talked about this fit, Panthers, Slayton, a few weeks ago, I was like, I'm going to predict that. I'm definitely predicting that. Now it's getting interesting as Higgins is supposed to be, at the time of talking, he's not tagged. He's supposed to be tagged. Is Slayton anywhere near Higgins? No, but he's a free agent, outside, lengthy receiver. Teams that need that and were in on Higgins now might have to be in on Slayton. They're not going to drop from T. Higgins to guys like Keenan Allen, slot receiver, Elijah Moore, slot receiver. They're not going to do that. They're going to go for a guy like Slayton, perhaps, or Stephon Diggs. So Panthers have some company. Could that be the Patriots, who are supposed to be really in on T. Higgins? They could get Slayton. They have a bunch of guys like this that are average, just above average or below. They need a big-time guy. I could see the Chargers, a great fit on the outside, to pair it Ladd McConkey for them. Seems like a Packers-type receiver. Could see that. The Commanders. But the Titans definitely are looking for speed. Their new GM came out and said that they want speed specifically at the receiver position to pair with Calvin Ridley. Slayton is that speed guy of free agency. They need another receiver. They have some spending money, and they actually have as their receiver coach the Giants' ex-receiver coach from a few years back. Wasn't very recently, but he's familiar with Darius Slayton, so I'd watch for the Titans as well. But a lot of teams, even more teams now, could be in on a guy like Darius Slayton. Another Panthers fit that it just stands out to me. I mentioned this in a somewhat recent video. I talked about Samuel kind of being a sleeper free agent. I talked about my favorite fit by far is the Carolina Panthers. Asante Samuel Jr., love the fit there. He is more of a zone corner, a playmaking corner. The Panthers defensive coach is Ejiro Evero, who has a zone background, specifically when he was with the Rams, coming up there, and then with the Broncos, it was a lot of cover four, and it was successful cover four. So, and he wants to mix it up a little bit, not only going to run cover four, but that's what he wants to run, right? And to me, that is what Asante Samuel Jr. is, to me at least. I guess people could debate it. Doesn't mean he can't fit other things, but he is a off coverage, cover four corner that could get his hands on the ball. Opposite side, you have J.C. Horn, who's more a physical lockdown guy. It is a really good pairing there, so I love that fit. I'd watch for the Bills as well. The Bills won't be able to be huge spenders in free agency, so the Samuel's going to cost a little bit because he's got upsize, a decent corner, but more in their price range, and they're then a zone-heavy defense. That can make some sense. I can see the Packers, Steelers like to mix it up a bit. The Colts I can see for Asante Samuel Jr. as well, but I do love, it's one of my favorite fits of free agency is Asante Samuel Jr. and the Panthers. We'll see if it happens. Rasul Douglas of the Buffalo Bills played well for them when healthy right before that. Remember, not this past year, the year before, trade deadline, he was dealt from the Green Bay Packers, even though he was playing very well for them, to the Buffalo Bills. And here are the Packers in need of a corner in free agency. Could they reunite? I could see it. When they traded him at the deadline, they had a different defensive coordinator they did now. And then this past year, they actually ran a lot more zone than I thought they would. So it looks like they're going to be more of a zone team, and that's what Rasul Douglas is. He is a veteran, smart zone coverage corner. The Packers could be moving on from Alexander, and they could be bringing a guy back that they're familiar with, that they really liked. They kind of just had to make a decision. He was going to be an expiring deal. We see that now. They had Alexander. They're already paying him a lot of money. They had a lot of other young guys, but things have kind of flipped a little bit. We know that's got to be a fit, right? We could definitely see him bringing him back, but I can see the Falcons as well. We talked about the Falcons being an obvious fit for DJ Reed, but we also talked about the obstacle there. Can they actually afford DJ Reed? Can be the top paid corner, at least in my opinion, but most likely. So they could look at that next tier. Jerry Gray is their defensive coach. He's a very highly thought of, defensive backs coach. Very highly thought of. He was the Packers DB coach for a bit. Very familiar with Rasul Douglas, so I could see that fit there with the Atlanta Falcons. Definitely could see Vikings, teams that looking for zone coverage corners. The Bucks, if they move on from Jamel Dean, but they do like right now McCollum and Dean, they could move on from Dean, so we'll see. But Douglas, a veteran corner, zone corner that will be available. Absolutely love this fit for Keenan Allen. The Denver Broncos, they match very well. That's why it's on this video. But the Broncos are looking for a slot receiver. They have an outside receiver in Cortland Sutton, slot receiver that can get open quick, work well at Bo Nix, especially when he's rolling out. I could just see that perfect fit, that perfect connection with Keenan Allen. But there's a connection there as well. Joe Lombardi on the staff because he had the Sean Payton background, but he also was with the Chargers with Keenan Allen, so there is a connection there as well. They're looking for a slot receiver. They have some spending money. It's not going to cost a lot. I think a really good fit with Bo Nix ball, and there's a connection obviously there. So I do love the Denver Broncos for Keenan Allen. I loved Chris Godwin for them. I just don't feel like he's going to be away from the Buccaneers. I think the Buccaneers are going to try to reach an agreement on that. Keenan Allen stands out just as much, just not as good as Godwin. The Commanders also stand out. Another team that's looking for a slot receiver. I think Keenan Allen's going to go to a spot where he really wants to play. Really a team that is a little more successful, a little more polished. And even though these are quarterbacks that were in the same class of Caleb Williams, and not really the quarterback, the offense in general, including the quarterback, a little more further along. The Commanders look like an appealing spot to play. I could totally see that. But there's been some rumors about going back to the Chargers. Ladd McConkey is a slot receiver. Keenan Allen's a slot receiver. Does it mean 0% chance? No, I just don't love it. Could he go back to the Bears? Sure, it's certainly possible. The Raiders could be a sneaky team. They just don't have that quarterback to appeal to Keenan Allen right now. I love the Broncos fit for Keenan Allen. Kind of a random one that I absolutely love is Brandon Stephens, a young corner that I think has upside. I think people will be sleeping on him a little bit. I love the fit with the Indianapolis Colts. There's a couple other good fits as well with some actually Ravens background defensive coaches. The Seahawks and Mike McDonald definitely could use another corner to play the outside. Anthony Weaver and the Dolphins could make some sense. They just recently released Kendall Fuller, but the Colts stands out big time. It just feels like, to me, it feels like a Lou Anarumo, who's their new defensive coach. It just feels like a defensive back in his scheme, just to me, how he runs things. He likes to run a mix of coverages, mix in man, and really every type of zone coverage. You don't see him kind of stick to one or two things, and that's what the Ravens did with Brandon Stephens. It always feels like Lou Anarumo likes the Bengals used to add corners or safeties that when they were coming out of college, it's like, what are they? Are they a corner? They could safety. I could totally see them switching positions. I could totally see them playing either spot. He's always had guys like that, and that's what Stephens is. That's what he was, actually, I should say, coming out of SMU. He, it kind of felt like he coming out is like, is this guy a safety? Is he a corner? And even early on in his career, the Ravens were kind of thinking that too. What do we do with them? He actually switched from the offensive side of the ball to the defensive side of the ball while he was in college too. So, and again, he got picked on at times for the Ravens because teams couldn't really pick on anywhere else in their defense. But again, kind of just getting going at his firm position somewhere recently in his career, learn from, a good organization, a good defense in the Ravens. Starting to get that experience, got a lot more experience, a lot more reps this year. I think he has a lot of upside. I love the fit with the Colts, and they're a team that they say, Ballard says he's finally going to be a little bit more active, I should say, in free agency. I've heard it before. Let's see, but he couldn't mean it this time. But they also are hinting that they're a little bit away, a ways away. They don't want to go out and get these older veteran guys. I think a guy like Stephens, who can play now but has so much upside, I think makes a lot of sense. I love that one. It's kind of a random one to love. But again, the Seahawks I'd watch for as well. Pair him with Woolen and Witherspoon. Witherspoon could play in the slot a bit, so he can use all three. But Dolphins kind of make some sense as well. I could see the Steelers as well. But he's a sneaky one. Brandon Stevens, he could go back to the Ravens for sure. They liked him this year enough to play him a little bit more. We will see, but I do love that Colts fit. But that'll wrap it up for this one. Just the fits that absolutely stand out. And of course, I take an extra step. I put teams to watch out for that it can realistically land out as well. So I love doing these videos. Hopefully you guys love them as well. Let me know your thoughts in the comments if you feel like I missed on any. We'll have more as the process goes on, and we'll have free agency rankings and predictions when the time is right, and then draft coverage as well, combine coming up. So join us for all that. That'd be much, much appreciated. If you could like, subscribe, channel, Gains on. It's going to do it. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.